Hey everybody, and on today's vlog, we are going to be playing Imperial Settlers Empires of the North by Portal Games. Let's check out this frosty and fun civilization card game.
Settlers from the three Nordic empires have decided to start their voyages and set sail for new lands in hopes of finding more resources and increasing their opportunities to expand. Building new structures, taking advantage of upcoming events, and outsmarting opponents is their path to greatness. You don't know who your opponent might be. It might even be a different clan from your nation. Even so, you will do what is necessary. Your current lands are meager and the resources scarce, so you'll need to work hard to acquire the food and resources necessary to thrive.
Hey Meeple people, what's going on? So Sarah, what game are we playing today?
Today we are going to be playing Empires of the North, which is the newest game in the Imperial Settlers universe from Portal Games. This is a completely standalone game, so there's a few other Imperial Settlers titles, but this one is completely standalone, so everything you need to play this one is in the box. It's just set in the same universe as those other games. So let's talk a little bit about the game. It is a sort of tableau building game where we are going to each control a different tribe, and we are going to be building up our own sort of village or area, and essentially we are trying to be the best at creating this area for our citizens, so that we are sort of like the king of all of the tribes. So it is an asymmetric game, which means that I have a deck of cards for my faction, Nick has a deck of cards for his faction, and there are some similarities in sort of like the structure and use of the cards, but what the cards actually allow each player to do is different based on that deck. So Nick can do some stuff that I can't do, I can do some stuff that Nick can't do, and we're going to each try to use our deck to sort of exploit its abilities faster and better and more efficiently than the other player. So the way that the game works is there are 4 phases of a round, and we go through each phase in order and just perform all of the actions of that phase, and then that round is over. And we play rounds until one or more players have gotten 25 or more victory points. And at this point, we'll finish that round by completing all of the phases left in that round when one player reaches 25 points or more, and then that is the end of the game. At that point, players will add up all of their points, and whoever has the most points wins. So, to start the game, we each get some basic lands, which are going to produce some resources for us. So my clan produces fish, rocks, and wood right off the bat. And I get to start with a little bit of all of that. I also get to start with 5 workers and a couple of ships, and I get this spent workers token, I guess, and this will be where my workers go when they're spent. In this game, when you spend your resources, they get returned to the supply, but when you spend your workers, they go to your spent workers tile, and you will get them back later in the game. I've also got these 2 markers here, and they have an X side and a blank side, and then I'm starting with the first player token as well. So what happens is at the beginning of a new round, the first thing we do is called the lookout phase. And in the lookout phase, we're going to set aside our hand of cards. So this is the existing hand of cards that I have. We're going to set that aside, and we are going to draw 4 cards off the top of our player decks. Then we are going to look at these cards, and we're going to decide which ones that we want to play and which ones we don't feel like we need to have to play ever. The number of cards that we decide that we want to keep, we're going to have to pay for those cards with workers. So let's say that I looked through this and I decided that I really wanted to keep these 2 cards, but these 2 weren't that important to me. I would discard these 2 cards, and then I would pay 2 workers to keep these 2 cards. And I would do that by putting my workers on my spent workers tile. Then I'd add these 2 cards to my hand of cards, and now they're available for me to play in the future. Now, there are a few different kinds of cards. There are cards that will let you build things, and they have different costs. So this one right here, in order to build this, I would have to pay a fish. So if I, on my turn, decided to build this card, I would simply pay a fish and put it in play. Now, this card would remain in play for the rest of the game unless something happens to it that would remove it from play. There are times when I can remove my own cards from play if I want to. I haven't seen anything yet that would let another player remove one of my cards. So once this card is in play, I can use it for the rest of the game to do whatever its ability is. And at the end of the game, every card that I have in my tableau will get me a point. So I will come back to how to use this in a bit. We have a few other kinds of cards too. So these 3 cards are all other types of cards that can be built as well. But instead of having a resource cost, I have to spend an action to be able to build these cards. And I'll come back to that in a few minutes. And then we also have some cards that would allow me to perform an ability, but then they would be discarded. And these, again, have a related action that has to be done before the card can be played. And again, I'll come back to that. So, at the end of the lookout phase, which is when we have paid for those cards and added them to our hand, we will move on to the action phase. And in the action phase, players will go back and forth between everyone in turn order, each player taking one action or passing. If you pass, you're out for the rest of the round and you cannot do anything else that round, but you also can't be targeted. So players can target each other and attack, which we'll talk a little bit more later. If you pass, you cannot be targeted and you can't be attacked. So either take an action or pass. And if you take an action, you can do that in one of 2 ways. You can either play a card, like we've done here, right? I spent a fish to play this card here. So that's an action that I could take. I could also use the ability of a card. So because I had played this on a previous turn, it says, action, spend a worker and a fish to sail and gain a point, right? Now, I could, on my turn, if this had already been in my village, I could decide to use my turn to perform that action. Now, every card can only be played once per round, and then it is turned 90 degrees to show that it's already been used, it's exhausted, it can't be used again, unless you have a special ability or card or something like that that would allow you to unexhaust the card and use it again. So once a card has been used, you turn it sideways to indicate that it has been exhausted, and then you do whatever it says. That would be an action that you could take on your turn. Another action that you could take on your turn is to use this blue token on this wheel right here. Now this wheel is made up of 5 different parts and each one of them is a separate part. So every time that we set up the game, we'll have a different wheel potentially. The first time that I use a space on this wheel, I'm going to take the blank side of my token and put it on that space. So if I wanted to explore, I'll take the blank side of my token and I'll put it here on the explore space and I will explore. Each one of these spaces lets me do something different. The explore one lets me draw a card off the top of my deck. The harvest one would let me gain the goods from one of my harvestable cards. So I could get 2 fish or a rock or 2 wood over here if I put my token on the harvest space. The populate space would just let me add a worker from the supply to my unused workers pool. The construct space would allow me to build a card from my hand for free. Let's pretend that I had in my hand this card. And I went to the construct space. Instead of spending the fish and the rock needed to build this card, I could instead construct it for free. So I would just put it into my tableau like so. And then finally, the last space, the sail space, would allow me to take one of my boat tokens and place it on this chart over here. If I'm the first person to do so, I put it here. If I'm not, let's pretend I was a different player, then I would just put it on the next space and so on. And we'll come back to this in a bit. So I can either play an action from my hand. I can play an action on a card that I've already played into my village, or I can place my token on this wheel here and play one of these actions. And those are the different actions that I can take for my turn. Now, if I have already placed this token in play, so let's say that on a previous turn I populated and I added a person to my supply. I can move this token one space to the right or left. So I could move it here to construct a building for free, or here to harvest goods from one of my farms. When I do that, I'm going to move the token and I'm going to flip it over to this exhausted side here. And this just indicates that that is the last action that I can take with that pawn. So I have 2 of those pawns, like I said, and you can put them on any one space that you want, but then you can typically only use that space and the space either to the right or left of that space.
But you have to have an apple to do that.
Yes. So there are some cards that would let you manipulate the placement of this so that if you really wanted to explore, but then later you wanted to use this same token to populate, well, normally you'd have to spend resources to move this token and be able to only do what's next to the tile that you're on. However, there are some cards or actions that would let you move this before. So there is quite a bit of strategy just in this part alone on how you place these tokens to be able to get things on this wheel that you really want, since you can only ever do the action that you place on and then possibly the actions to the right or left of this most of the time. Okay, so in the action phase, you can play a card. You can use a card with the action text, or you can use one of these tokens over here to perform one of these actions. Now, these actions over here are also related to cards that you might have in your hand. For example, if I decided to construct on my turn, let's say that it's my turn right now, and I've decided to construct. This would be the single action that I get for this turn, but I could construct, which would let me build a card for free. Additionally, I have this card in my hand, and it says, in order to build this card, I have to construct. So when I construct, using this action here, not only do I build a card for free, but I can also play this card right here into my tableau, and then on future turns, I would have this resource available to harvest as well. And it counts for one of the cards in my tableau at the end of game when I go to score.
And since it's a resource card, you also get those 2 resources right away.
Yes. There's a lot.
There's a lot going on in this.
There's a lot in here, and I'm trying not to hit every single rule just so that this won't take 25 minutes. Like some of the other Learn to Play videos for this one do. So there are cards that let me explore and populate just the same way that I've done this construct. And those are basically the kinds of cards that you will see in the game. There's one other type of card that you might see in the game, and I will talk about that. I'll talk about that right now because it kind of dovetails into this. So just in the same way that I could have played this card when I did the construct action on the action wheel over here, there are also the action cards that I talked about earlier, where I would have to perform a particular action, but if I did perform that action, then I could immediately also play one of these cards. So if I had populated, then I could play this card in addition to my populate action, and it would let me do something extra. So those are all of the kinds of cards that you will see in your deck. Even though the decks are asymmetrical, those are all of the kinds of cards that we might see in the deck and what they can sort of do. So on your turn, you take any one action, and it can be all of the actions that I've previously described, or you pass. Once every player has passed, that phase of this round is over, and we would move on to the next phase. And in the next phase, we are going to go on any expeditions. So that's going to deal with this board right here and these ships. So at the start of the game, each player has 2 of these ships right here, and if in the action phase you took a sail action, you could put one of your ships in play. And when you do this, you have to decide immediately when putting the ship into play if you're going to attempt to go to a nearby island or a distant island. And you also want to decide right now if you're going to try to possibly conquer the island, or if you just want to pillage the island. Now, you're going to need to supply your ship with various things based on what you want to do. If you want to go to a nearby island, it's not going to take any provisions to get there because it's pretty close. But if you want to go to a distant island, it's going to take a while to get there, and you're going to need a fish to go with you to kind of feed your crew as you go. So when you place this ship here, if you decide that you want to go to a distant island, you also need to put a fish on it so that you can make it to that distant island. And then, like I said, you also need to determine if you want to pillage or possibly if you want to conquer. The pillage option is just going to give you these resources. So in this case, if I pillaged this particular island, I would get 2 wood and a victory point. And that would be it. That card would get discarded, I would get those resources, and that would be that. But if I had a raise token, when I launch my boat, I could also place a raise token on my boat, and that means that I'm giving myself the option of conquering an island instead of just pillaging it. If I conquer an island, now in this case here, I've got my fish on my boat, I've got my raise token on my boat, so let's go to a distant island and let's conquer it. Let's go to this island here. So this one I could pillage, right? And I'd get a rock and 2 apples and a victory point, or I could conquer it if I had that raise token on my boat. If I conquer it, I get to add this island to my tableau of cards, and it provides some benefits to me. Sometimes it'll provide me with some immediate benefits, like in this case where I could get an apple and a rock just for building it. And then sometimes it provides me with an action or ability that I might be able to use for the rest of the game, just like any of my other actions or abilities. Once I have, let's say that I did that with this boat right here. Let's say that I went ahead and took this one here. Once I've done that, I will remove the boat from play, from this board. I'll bring it back to my supply. I'll spend any of the tokens that I put on that ship, even if I didn't use them. If for whatever reason I decided that I wasn't actually going to conquer, or if I wanted to go to a nearby island instead of a further away island, I would still spend all the tokens that I put on my boat. And then I would get the island or the goods that I would have conquered or pillaged, but this would not refill. And that means that the next player, well, it would be this one here, the next player in turn order would have to choose, if they were also going to be going over here, they would have to choose to either do this one here or one off the top of the deck without getting to know what that was ahead of time. So the person who goes over here first has the best choice of all of the islands available to them on where they want to pillage or conquer based on the information that they can see. Now you can always, always, always pillage or conquer off the top of a deck, but you don't really know what you might be gaining by doing that until you actually see it. So once every boat in this phase has gotten to pillage or conquer, then that is the expedition phase. And the last phase we have to do this round is the cleanup phase. And in the cleanup phase, we're just going to do a little bit of sort of maintenance. We're going to return our workers to our supply from our spent workers. So we're going to move them back to our supply from here. We're going to untap any cards that we're going to unexhaust any cards. Tap is like a copyrighted term that Wizards of the Coast uses in their game Magic the Gathering. And it's legally not permissible to use that word in any other setting because of the copyright. So you will unexhaust any cards that you have exhausted, and we'll get back any tokens we need to get back. We'll kind of reset some things over here, and then we'll move on to the next round if no player has reached 25 or more points. And we will just continue to play round after round after round, going through each of those 4 phases in each round until one or more players has reached 25 or more points. And then we'll finish that round entirely, go through all 4 phases that round. And then when we get to the end of the last phase of that round, we'll add up all of our points and we'll see who has the most. Now, in addition to points on the scoreboard, players will also get 1 point for every card in their tableau. We'll get points for some leftover resources if you have any. So if I had these resources at the end of the game, I get some points for that. If you had any money, which you can acquire at various points throughout the game, if you had any money, those would be worth victory points. We add it all up. Whoever has the most points wins.
Awesome. Pretty cool.
All right, should we try it?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's get into it. All right, all of our meeple people, we will get back to you when we are going into the mid game. All right. Talk to you guys later. Toodles. So hello, Sarah, and welcome back, our meeple people. How's it going so far
I think
in
it's
our
going
game?
well. Nick has 15 points, which is a little bit more than halfway to the win. I only have 12 right now, which is about exactly halfway to the win. 12 and a half is to the end game. But I feel like even though I'm a few points behind Nick, I feel like I'm doing really well. I have a big stash of gold, and gold can be used to purchase resources, or if you still have it at the end of the game, they're all worth points. So I actually have, if I don't spend any of this gold right here, I have 7 points right here alone. And then I feel like I have more cards in my village than Nick has in his, and each of those is also worth a point. Plus, I feel like I have a nice engine going.
You do have a pretty nice engine going.
Yeah.
I do well when sailing happens, but I don't think it's. I think I could. What could happen is I could probably end the game faster, but I need to be able to end the game and then keep the win.
We'll see if that happens.
Yeah.
So, what do you think so far, Nick?
I really enjoy this one. I was not. I don't know. I feel like some of Portal games intimidate me, and so I'm like, oh my gosh, I need
They're
to have.
definitely, like, I'm sure you noticed, viewers, just in the intro when I'm talking about how to play the game, a lot of times I can kind of condense that down to a fairly quick, like, description, and in this one it took a lot longer to explain, and I didn't even hit on, like, every single thing that happens in the game. I just kind of gave you what I felt was, like, a basic overview, and it still took a lot longer than some of the other games that we feature on the channel. So I think it's definitely... it's not necessarily like more complex. It's just
There's a lot going on, and a lot of things you can kind of like what we call it, combo-tastic.
Yeah. There's a lot of and there's also, I don't want to say fiddly because I don't feel like it plays fiddly, but there's also a lot of like little things here and there. Like for example, with this card right here, I started with this basic resource card, and then I was able to upgrade it by adding this card to it. But you'll notice that the resource on this one here is like sort of in the middle of this box, and the resource here is like right justified. And so when you go to add cards like this to your tableau, they have to be with the matching like card. So this one is just like an upgrade to this one. So I could have played this one if this one hadn't already been in there, and the only way I can play this is by like upgrading it to this. So there's quite a bit of that kind of stuff where it's like, in this particular instance, this is how this particular card works kind of thing. And it just makes the overall game a little bit more complex, I guess, than some of the other ones that we've featured on the channel previously. And I think that that is fairly well representative of most Portal titles. Most Portal titles are still, I would say family games, but definitely on the mid to heavy side of family games.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so I'm enjoying myself, and I believe Sarah is enjoying herself.
I am, and I'm liking it better this time around than in the previous times we played. We played a couple of other times before, and the first time I did not have fun much at all, and I think it was just because I was just trying to learn and understand all of those little idiosyncrasies of the game, so I didn't have much fun at all the first time I played. And then the next time I played, I had a little bit more fun than before, but I wasn't having like just the greatest time ever. This time I'm having more fun than I've ever had before with it, and I feel like I'm doing well, and I'm excited to see sort of how the game wraps up.
Yeah. So, our meeple people, we're going to go ahead and get back into it and see who's going to be the winner and the loser, and the best Viking tribe of the North's empire.
I think that's one thing too about this particular game, and some of Portal's other games too, is that there's a lot of content that you can choose to play with, right? Like in this one, it's only a 1 to 4 player game, but they offer 6 different playable factions. So we are playing 2 factions that are recommended for new players, but there are 6 different factions that you can mix and match and play against each other however you want. So, so even though once you learn the basic game, you kind of know everything, your particular faction, the faction that you'll be playing that game, it could be vastly different than ones that you've played before, right? So this is the 3rd game that we've played, and this is the 3rd time that I've controlled this particular faction. And I think that's part of the reason that I'm having a better time with it this time around, is because I kind of know what's in this deck now. I kind of know how it works and what, what to expect from the cards and that kind of thing, and which direction to sort of aim my engine, right? But if I was playing with a totally brand new faction that I'd never played with before, it would probably bring back a little bit of that learning curve.
Yeah. But still nice replayability options.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so I think the flip side of that, right, is that there's a huge amount of replayability, even with just the 6 factions that are in the box, especially if you're playing lower player counts. With 2 players, we could play, I think is it 36 games, right?
Somewhere around there. You're the mathematician. I'm the creative edition.
I think if I've done the math correctly, we could play 36 games and always be playing different factions against other factions that haven't been played that way before. That math might be completely wrong. But anyway, it's a large number. We could play this game a lot of times before we'd ever even necessarily have to play the same 2 factions against each other, right? And even then, it would still be a totally different game. So
yeah. All right, well, we'll get back to you guys in a little bit. And so, toodles. And welcome back, our meeple people. We are now at the end of the game for Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North. And so, how'd it go, Sarah?
It went well. We fought valiantly, and it was a close game.
And you had to do what you had to do.
Score came out to be 53 to 50.
Yeah. Sarah is the winner, and I am the loser.
So, I really enjoyed this game. I think that once I got to know my particular faction a little bit more, it was a lot more interesting and fun and less frustrating to play. The first couple times I didn't really know my faction that well, so I was just kind of doing different things. But by this time, I feel like I knew my faction well enough to sort of understand the most effective way to build my engine and to get it working quickly and efficiently. And yeah, and there, like we said earlier, there are 6 different factions. So I feel like I have not by any means like conquered this one in any way. I feel like there's still a lot left for me to discover in just this one. So the fact that there are 6 different factions in the box means to me that like there's a lot to discover in this one. And I think if you are willing to kind of go into the game knowing that like because of the asymmetric nature of each of the decks, it's going to be not a constant learning curve, but maybe a little bit more learning than other games that might feel similar in weight. What did you think, Nick?
I thought it was a good one. I really enjoyed it. When I saw it, I was very interested, and I think PortalCon is happening as we were recording.
I don't know. I think it may have wrapped up.
Well, some people are, I guess, dissecting it this weekend.
Yeah.
During this recording.
I haven't caught any of the announcements or anything like that from PortalCon this year. But that's always like their big weekend to announce like a bunch of upcoming products and like new things that they're doing and that kind of stuff.
Sneak peeks and all that good stuff. And Q&As and picking the mastermind of Ignacy Chevicek and seeing what he's doing.
So I don't know if they've announced anything new for this particular game, although they are pretty generous with the content for their games, so I don't feel like I need anything new for this one for quite a while. Yeah. But if I want it, it will probably be there. And they may have announced something for this at PortalCon.
So what Sarah said, she still feels like she's figuring out her faction. The deck that I'm using is very heavy on the sailing in the game. And so there's still a lot to kind of just get into in this one. And it's very enjoyable to just figure it out and just dive deeply into it. And again, we said there's just going to be a lot of replayability with this one because you're still just chewing on each faction and each deck and just trying to figure it out so you can master it and then, move on to the next thing. But it's a really enjoyable game. I really had a good time with it. And yeah.
I like
Thumbs
it.
up?
I think, I like it. I think there's quite a bit going on. You have to kind of manage fairly tight resources.
Yes.
It's not necessarily very easy to get resources. They're not super plentiful, and you need them to trigger like actions on cards and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's a good deal of strategy and thinking ahead as far as like, when is the best time to acquire the resources you need? And then we know which cards are you going to use those resources to activate and that kind of stuff. And it's not quite as tight as some of Ignacci's other games, but it is still a fairly tight game. You don't really want to just be, like playing cards willy-nilly. You want to be thoughtfully
or using
building
actions like willy-nilly either.
Yeah. You want to be thoughtfully building an engine, and you don't want to just throw away a lot of your actions or cards or that kind of thing, because they are fairly scarce,
Yeah.
But I like all of the different things you can do in the game. At first, I thought maybe there was a little bit too much going on for me to enjoy it. But after you kind of learn the basics of it and the basics of the deck that you're playing, for me, it kind of eased up a little bit, and actually liked that I had some different options. You can interact with your particular faction by way of playing like your own cards. You can force actions to happen based on how you interact with this sort of rondel over here. And then you can go on these like voyages and
they're very plentiful. If it's like you can have a recurring action, or you can get a bunch of resources and some victory points.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that there's enough going on so that even though the game is fairly tight, you have some room to move around. And if you feel like you're being stymied in one direction, or you just can't get momentum going this way, the way that you want to, there are other places you can kind of like look around and find a different path. And that made the game feel a little bit less restrictive. So yeah, I like it. I think it was really interesting, and I think that it was fun. It's well produced. The only thing that I would say I feel like was less than ideal is that you had to apply stickers to these tokens, and I hate putting stickers on wooden tokens. It always feels like a downgrade, right? Like you have this nice wooden piece and then you're gonna stick a sticker to it. But anyway, that is the only thing in the game that I didn't think was like of the highest quality. Everything else is nice. All the cards are decent card stock. All of the tokens are nice thick tokens. They even had in the well, first off, like they're shaped resources, right? That's
and the
nice
resource tray was really nice.
Yeah, and then the little meeples, they had male and female meeples. So, those are both females. Sorry. Let's see. So there's male and female meeples, and they didn't even have to provide like a difference for us, but they did. So that was nice. And then, like Nick pointed out, the trays are designed so that you can just pick this up out of the box, set it in the play area, and start playing.
Yeah. One of my gripes is I wish that had a lid.
Yeah, so that would be really nice.
You could just close it.
Yeah, that would be really nice because we store our games, well, that's not a good... Look kind of over here. We store our games vertically.
Yeah.
And that means that without a lid, in order to keep this organized, we actually do have to put each of these in baggies before we put it back in the box. Otherwise, without a lid, it's all going to spill out in the box. But other than the absence of a lid, it's nice to have the tray that you can just kind of lift out of the box and set on the table.
And then just pass around to everybody.
Yep,
So
and
it's
got spaces for everything, and it even has like it even has a raised indent in here to show you like which tokens are supposed to go in. So you see it like that one shows you that it is for the raised tokens. So you can see that it is indeed for that section, and they're all like that. There's one for each of the resources.
awesome.
Okay, so
All right. Yeah, very cool. All right, all our Meeple people, this was our vlog on Imperial Settlers Empires of the North from Portal Games, and we all hope you enjoyed this vlog. Well, until next time, we'll talk to y'all later. Toodles!